Hey everybody, so welcome to another video, and I wanted to talk today about something that I get asked quite a lot by my students, and that's about how to get better as a reader, reading music. And I thought it would be useful to maybe look at 4 or 5 books that I also really like and I've used over the last 20 years for reading studies and to help students with assignments, to work on things. And some of these are also going to help you develop your vocabulary as well for playing and improvising, in the jazz kind of idiom. So let me give you a list of these, and I'm also going to post these in the description with a link as well. I just created a little Amazon affiliate thing, so if you do that, you'll be helping out my channel too as well, and you can get straight to the links on Amazon. All of these are really easily available still, which is kind of great. So the first one I wanted to talk about, and of course there was a film that kind of went alongside this, was the Standing in the Shadows of Motown book. And this is a great, it's a really cool history of the Motown bass sound of James Jamerson. There's some great biographical stuff in here, but also what I liked about it is the second half of the book has a whole selection of bass players playing through some of the classic Jamerson lines. And some of these are fairly simple. So things like You Can't Hurry Love and Shotgun, these are not terribly challenging, but then you've got some of the classic things, even like What's Going On, has a few little tricks and turns in it. And then there's some really burning tunes in here as well. Home Cooking, which is I think performed by David Hungate in this one, is a serious bass part. I Was Made to Love Her, which Marcus Miller plays, is another great bass line, really iconic, and probably the single most challenging iconic bass part is performed by the inimitable Anthony Jackson, and this is How Long Has That Evening Train Been Gone from Diana Ross's Love Child album, which is a great album actually, and I found an original copy of that on vinyl recently, which just sounds killer. So this is great in terms of for the rhythmic and note content side, and there's some really interesting chromatic elements in here. So these are tricky just as bass parts to perform. So what I did with this book was I would try and sight read and play along, and my copy is so old it even came with cassettes at the back, and I think now it might come with a CD or a download, I'm not sure, but what I did was I would try and sight read along with the versions that have been recorded for this by all these different bass players. So that's a really cool way to throw yourself in at the deep end and just try and play along. And then obviously try and take, each one slower, half the tempo, whatever you like. But this is a great and really cool book just in itself to kind of give you an insight into some of the Motown classic lines. Now, note recognition and learning where the notes lie on the fingerboard is one of the key things about, learning to play the bass successfully, read on it. So one of the other things I really like, and I think my copy of this book might date back to the 1980s, so I don't think you'll be able to find this exact copy, but was Friedrich Dotzauer and these cello studies. And I love these because I think almost all of them are written in bass clef. They fit right on the instrument, you see. So with these, they go through all sort of different permutations. Some of these deal with double stops, which is great. So, playing tenths and so on, or thirds. Some of these are written with just more of a relentless 16th note line to play, and the tempos are pretty ferocious on all of these. Allegro is fast, so, if you get these up to the actual tempo they're intended to be played, you're doing really well. And they will take you across the range of the neck. You're going to go from a bottom G all the way up to a high F or beyond on some of these. And also the thing is, because these were played on a cello with a bow, we're playing them fingerstyle, so your plucking hand gets a huge amount of work out on these. So I love this book, and this is great. And the other thing about this, these are really inexpensive. I think the link I've put for this one, I think it might be $15 or something like that. So none of these books are expensive. They're really accessible. Even the Jamerson one, which is really nice as far as like production of it, I think this is $20-something on Amazon right now, so it's not bad. Okay, so that's these two, which are kind of really note recognition, but very different stylistically. And then another thing which is great just for finding the notes on the neck is find some walking bass method books or transcriptions of bass lines or some of those old Aebersold ones, and there's a Ron Carter book that I don't know how old this is. One of my students pointed this out to me, which I put in the description below with a link, and this is Ron Carter's Building Jazz Bass Lines, and that just looks fantastic. I mean, you're getting an insight into Ron's, concept for creating walking bass, and a lot of walking bass lines are written in quarter notes, so you're not worried too much about the rhythmic stuff. That's where something like some of the more advanced Motown lines, become really valuable, because in this there's a lot of syncopations, there's 16th notes, there's 16ths going into 8th notes, and some chromatic stuff. But on the walking bass there may be some chromatic passing notes, but a lot of it is quarter note stuff, and it's really, you're going to see how the lines support principal chord tones and how bass lines are created through changes. So you're learning a little bit about the bass line creation, but you're also reading a different style of bass line as opposed to classical repertoire or funk or R&B and Motown. So it's a really good thing to do. Okay, so on the jazz side as well, probably the single most amazing book I think I bought, and I bought this when I was a teenager. So this is a very well-worn copy. It still looks the same, but not quite as beaten up, is this Charlie Parker omnibook. And you want to get the bass clef version. I mean, you don't have to, you could read the treble clef one and just figure it out, but this is the bass clef dedicated version. And unlike some of the omnibooks, which don't fit that well even when they're at the bass clef, like the Coltrane one, to me it doesn't sit as well on the instrument the way it's been written. But the alto sax, and then when it's put in bass clef like this, it absolutely fits beautifully on the bass. On a 4-string bass, you can play everything in here. And the Parker book is incredible, because what you get is you get the melodies written out for you, and then the solos transcribed. So you can learn things like Billy's Bounce, you can learn Au Privard, The Head for Anthropology, it's got Donna Lee in here, Now's the Time, Scrapple from the Apple. These are tunes that, if you go and sit in on a jam session and you wanted to get into more of a jazz scene in your town, it's great to know some Parker tunes, learn the melodies as well. And this book is just chock full of great harmonic information too. There's a load of stuff. My copy, you can probably see this, I've got like penciled annotations on here, so what I would do is when I found a really cool line or a lick, I'd outline what Parker was doing in here. Like if there's like a 2-5-1 lick, I'd be like, oh, he's playing the flat 9 on the 5 chord, and I even penciled it in what's going on. And this is like my notes from when I was 19. So this is one of those books where kind of does double duty, and I might even do a whole separate video just on kind of breaking down some of this stuff. Let me know in the comments below if you would dig that. So this is an incredible book, and again, what is this? I think this is $20 around there. Killer. It's gonna really get you reading with accidentals, chromatic, notes notated in sharps and flats. It's gonna get you kind of understanding more lines on here. If you can play these along with the original recordings, you're doing very, very well, because some of these are at 300 BPM. I mean, some of the tempos are ferocious on this. So this is an incredible book, a really great resource. And I mean, like I said, you can tell how much I love my copy. And this is my original one, so this might be 30 plus years old. So, and it's great to see that still in print. It's a great book. Another cool one, which was recommended to me years ago by Jeff Berlin, weirdly, when I met him at a gig with John McLaughlin in 1990 something, was this, the Chord Studies for Electric Bass. It used to be called Chord Studies for Trombone. It's basically the same book, and that's out of print, but the electric bass one is very much in print, and some of this book has fingerings, like fingering suggestions bracketed under the notes. I would recommend learning to read everything in at least 2 positions, 2 different fingerings where possible on the bass. So for any of these books, I mean, the Motown one, the Jamerson one, that's probably not necessarily possible, because some of it demands the use of open strings and particularly play down in the bottom position. But this book, definitely, because it's taking you through different figures and lines, I would try and play this in at least 2 positions that are practical. It's really a great thing to do. This takes you through all the basic triad types and then 7th arpeggios using approach notes. And then the coolest thing is at the end of each chapter, you get these great chromatic, like really deeply chromatic exercises, which are based on the preceding 4 or 5 exercises, but kind of taken to the nth degree. So this is very cool. And again, you know, reading wise, it's going to take you right up into the ledger lines. Like sometimes you're reading up to a high C on the neck or beyond. So this is really fantastic. So this, or a version of this, has been in my bass library for 30 years. Okay, so another great book, and also, you know, gets you into some harmony here as well. On that topic as well, on stuff that's more in the jazz vocabulary, I did actually a feature for this for an online bass magazine some years ago, and talked about a blues in here. So Bob Mintzer's books are amazing. Bob's obviously an insanely talented composer and tenor saxophone player, and this book is just wonderful. So what this is basically, like it says, it's 14 jazz and funk etudes. The funk stuff is more like kind of like a Tower of Power style kind of grooves, but Bob's playing these on the recording. My one came with a CD. I don't know if it comes with that now, but my version, he's playing the funkier lines on a bass clarinet, and it sounds badass to play along with that. So you can get to play along with him with the recordings, and there's a brief explanation before each piece about some of the ideas in it, but he doesn't go too in depth. He just kind of goes, I'm going to give you a few little pointers on each, but then he kind of just lets you loose on it, and it's really up to you to dive in. Like the blues that starts with, this is not easy. This is not an easy piece of music, especially when you've got to play it at, I forget, the tempo is, well, it's half at 100, so it's like 200 BPM, and it's really challenging, but it's an incredible melody. And when he does specific ideas in this, he'll actually kind of give you a little idea, like there's a Coltrane giant steps kind of matrix idea here, and he puts train in here. So he shows you what he's doing there a little bit. So he gives you little pointers. So this is an amazing book. I've worked on a lot of these pieces for students, and I even chatted with Bob about this before I shared the blues on YouTube and with students sometimes. And he's been very generous in allowing me to do that. And I really think this is an amazing book. It's very challenging. This is one of the more advanced books I'm recommending. But if you get this, just try these things slowly. You don't have to play it at the tempo on the play along or whatever. Just try them slow. But the thing is to not be intimidated by this. Try and read every day. You know, that's one of the things. So I did this little, in the description, I'm going to post everything. And I might also do this as a PDF, but you can basically just cut and paste everything. But the points I put, and I think this is really important. So when you're doing the cello studies pieces, and you can also check out Bach's Cello Suites as well, of course, the 6 cello suites. When you're playing the cello stuff, remember the bass guitar sounds an octave lower than the written music. So when you're playing, let's say, through some of these cello etudes, right? You're going to notice a couple of times it goes really low, like to a low D here, okay? But really, this whole piece would have been played an octave higher. It sounds an octave higher than we would play it when the cello does. So if you want to play it in the cello register, you play these 8 VA, an octave above. And that's something to bear in mind also when you play the Bach Cello Suites. A lot of people end up playing like that G major prelude, and they start on the 3rd fret G on the E, but really it starts on the G that is the open G. You know, it'll sound clearer and speak better like that. But what I did with this was I would play it in the written register here, and I'm sounding an octave lower than the cello there, playing it. But then I would play it an octave higher too. So now you're getting double value out of the study piece, you see. So this is a really important thing to remember with the classical etudes. It's really important, and it'll sound nicer like that. So try and find at least 2 positions on the instrument to play something, whether it's in one octave and then an octave above, or in the same register when possible, and then somewhere else in the same register. For instance, you know, your G, that's an open G string, is also the G on the 5th fret of the D string. That same G repeats on the 10th fret of the A string, and that also repeats high up on the E string, you see, on the 15th fret. So sometimes you're going to find there's 2 or 3 positions to play the same thing, and more on a 5 string. So always bear that in mind if you want to really explore the range of the instrument, okay? The other thing I put was start slow, you know, 60, 75 BPM, for example, yeah? Or slower. Develop the idea of reading ahead, you know, so you're looking at the bar, but you should ideally be looking at 1 or 2 notes ahead of where you're actually playing, so then you're not surprised by a large octave leap or something like that, a large intervallic leap up or down, for example. Also, play notes full length. Sometimes, and it sounds really obvious, but it's really noticeable sometimes with teaching people. People play the notes too short. So if something is indicated with staccato with the dot above the note, well, that's one thing. But don't automatically play things short. You know, especially when these classical pieces are being played, and a walking bass line, for example, you want nice, long, flowing legato, long notes, generally speaking, on those. Now, the other thing is try reading every day. I would say try, if you have time, 30 minutes minimum a day. It's really good to do this regularly rather than cram 2 hours of reading in on a Saturday afternoon or something. You know, better to do a little and often. And then another point, and I was lucky enough because obviously I was doing a lot of this at music college, but if you can read with someone else, I used to try and read with horn players or a guitar player that was better at reading than me, because that will push you and pull you up towards their level, and that is one of the greatest things you can do. You know, also see if you can get in a band or an ensemble or rehearsal band that is reading charts. Probably the single most challenging reading ensemble I've done has been playing with different big bands. You know, here in Los Angeles was a band I played with for a number of years where, you know, there were people like Leif Thornburg in the band, Carl Verheyen on guitar. There was amazing players, you know, who these guys just read anything. So you are forced to rise to their level. Same in New York City. I played with a great big band, and you know, I remember on one gig, you know, we had to sight read Havona, you know, including like a Jaco solo arranged for horns and bass, playing that whole solo together. And I'd played his solo a couple of times before, but I was virtually sight reading on the gig. So that was ass kicking. So this is really, really great, okay? So all of these books I'm going to list in the description below with my Amazon affiliate link. So if you want to support the channel, please click on those and buy them through there if you want. They're all available, at least today when I checked. They're all actually in print, which is kind of great. And let me know what you think in the comments below. If you want me to explain any more of this, you know, I might kind of cover an individual book in more depth. I'm thinking like the Parker book is so full of great information, I might well do that. But I just wanted to do a video on this because I thought it might be really useful for you guys, and it's a question that I'm often asked by students about books that I recommend and what I worked on. And this is stuff I genuinely have worked on myself. You know, I mean, the Parker book, the Mincer, the Motown, the chord studies, and the cello stuff. I mean, I think those books with me date back 30 years, you know, and that copy of the Parker book is definitely at least 30 years old. So anyway, hope that's of help, and I'll see you on the next lesson. Please support the channel. If you want to purchase the books through the affiliate links below, that would be great. And also, if you want to visit my website and check out any of my video downloads or get in touch with me for lessons, that's at rufusphilpott.com. And you can also use the Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to support the channel too. Everything is in the description below.